OUR is here to regulate the operation. But we want to light and power your internet and phone. The OUR is here to get you to know your rights.
The OUR is here to regulate how the public utilities operate. Water, light, phone, and internet. The OUR keep them in check.
Contact us at 1-888-CALL-OUR, the Office of Utilities Regulation. OUR, regulating utilities for the benefit of all.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for this very important webinar entitled Assessing JPS's 2019-2024 Tariff Application. Why will it be different? It is being put on today by the Office of Utilities Regulation, the OUR. My name is Elizabeth Bennett Marsh, and I'll be your moderator for today, and I'm the Public Education Specialist at the OUR. Now, pursuant to the OUR Act, the OUR is empowered to regulate the supply and distribution of electricity services in Jamaica. The Jamaica Public Service Company Limited, JPS, is expected to submit its 5-year tariff proposal to the OUR by April this year. This will be the first such application since the introduction of the amended Electricity Act of 2015 and the Electricity License of 2016. Today's webinar is intended to afford you a better understanding of the processes and procedures employed by the OUR in assessing the application submitted by the JPS. Why will it be different, and how you as consumers can and should get involved in the process. To achieve this objective today, we have put together a group of panelists who I'm sure will break down things for you because they are very integral in assessing and analyzing the JPS's application once it is received. But before I introduce my panelists, I have a special guest for you today, and he'll be making a special presentation at the beginning of our webinar. And now I take this opportunity to welcome our own Director General, Ansad Hewitt. Welcome, Ansad.
Thank you, Liz.
And you'll be hearing from him in a little while. My panelists today are the OUR's Manager, Regulation and Policy for the Electricity and Water and Sewerage sector, or sectors, Winston Robotham. Welcome.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. To my right, a little bit off to my right, Regulatory Economist Consultant at the OUR, Camille Rowe. Thanks for joining us, Camille.
I'm glad to be here.
And to Camille's right, Consumer Affairs Specialist in charge of policy at the OUR, a familiar face to us, for those who are joining us regularly on our webinars, Colette Good.
Thank you for having me again, Liz.
Thank you. The format for today's webinar is as follows. There will be brief presentations by the panelists, and then we throw open the floor, so to speak, for you to ask your questions and your comments. And how can you do that? For those who are joining us on YouTube, feel free to leave any questions you have in our YouTube channel, or on our YouTube channel. For those who are joining us on Facebook Live, feel free to leave your comments there as well. We'll see it. And for those of you who may be on your telephone, maybe you're listening, maybe you can't get the chance to go on a YouTube, but you're going on your telephone, then we have a special WhatsApp number for you. And that number is 876-316-2647. That's 876-316-2647. I will be repeating it throughout the course of this webinar. Before I ask our panelists to start weighing in on this very important topic, I'm now going to throw over to our Director General, Ansad Hewitt. Ansad, over to you.
Thanks again, Liz. I take this opportunity to congratulate the OUR's team on organizing this webinar to provide stakeholders with information on the upcoming review of JPS's tariff. To my mind, this webinar is another demonstration of the OUR's commitment to transparency and keeping our stakeholders informed of what we're doing and how we are doing it. As you will learn from the presentations and discussions, JPS's rate review process will differ significantly this time around from such previous undertakings. The two most notable changes: introduction of a revenue cap approach which replaces the price cap mechanism, and 2, the substitution of a tariff for the historic test year approach. Accordingly, this calls for a number of critical activities leading into the review. These include the publication of a criteria by which details the methodology to be applied by the OUR in the calculation of aspects of the tariff, the development of an integrated resource plan, or what we popularly termed IRP, and this is to be done by the ministry responsible for energy, MSET, and the last thing is the construction of a 5-year business plan by JPS. It is worth noting that the IRP is one of the most critical activities in the rate review process and should be published at least 15 months prior to the submission of the 2019 tariff application. The IRP is required to inform the 5-year business plan to be submitted by JPS. Unfortunately, while the OUR is aware that there has been ongoing work on the IRP, it is still incomplete at this stage. We therefore consider it important to indicate to all stakeholders at this juncture that inputs from a recently completed IRP will be absent from the 2019 rate review process. The OUR also wishes to underscore at this point that while it has taken the position that it is obliged to review and issue its determinations on JPS's tariff application, the absence of an IRP is less than ideal. Notably, the results of the IRP should have informed the mix and timing of generation plants that are expected to come online during the rate review period, i.e. 2019 to 2024, and the level of reinforcements that would be required to the transmission network to support the new generating plants and maintain the reliability of the power system. This would indicate to the grid operators of its existing generating fleet and what, if any, retirement, additional capital investments, and maintenance would be required for the business. 2, and that is efficiency and fuel mix evolution, including renewables, over the rate review period. And 3, expected levels of technical losses on the transmission network. JPS's business plan should have reflected all the above considerations and would have included the corresponding cost and tariff implications. In the absence of an IRP, JPS will have to base its planning and submissions on the best available information. By the same token, the OUR will have to make decisions on the same basis. The big drawback to this is that the initial absence of the IRP creates further complications when it becomes available later on. And if the information in it differs from what will be the case. Depending on how early the IRP is released, there is also the risk of stranded or redundant investments, which would ultimately increase cost for consumers. The IRP is also an important tool for determining the long-run marginal costs, what we refer to as LRMC, of electricity generation and transmission. LRMC is a key parameter in the electricity tariff design, as tariffs based on LRMC send efficiency in the usage, operation of, and investment in the network, so that costs are minimized in the long run. Here again, the absence of the IRP could result in tariff design that may prove less than efficient. The OUR, in reviewing JPS's 2019 rate review application, will therefore need to perform a delicate balancing act to ensure that the limitations imposed by the IRP's absence are given due consideration and weighting. It might also provide some comfort to stakeholders to note that the current regulatory framework provides for the undertaking of extraordinary reviews, as there might indeed be a need to revisit certain decisions once an IRP is completed, and especially if JPS's business plan is reworked. I trust the ensuing presentation and discussion will prove most enlightening. Best wishes. Thank you.
So there you have it, the OUR's Director General outlining the challenge that we can anticipate in assessing this year's application that's due to be submitted by the JPS in April, the absence of an integrated resource plan, the IRP. What else will be different this year? For that, we're now going to turn to our panelists, starting with Winston Robotham. Winston, over to you.
Thanks again, Elizabeth. And this afternoon, as the DG mentioned, we have some challenges, but nevertheless, there is going to be a rate review. And so I'll be walking you through the process and why it will be different from what we have done in the past. In 2015, there was a new Electricity Act, and so we will mention that there is a license change, and we will summarize some of the differences that is included in this particular rate review. There's a rate review process I'll be walking you through, and later on, Camille will take you through what is expected in the JPS's application. So in the new regulation, as I mentioned, there is a new electricity license that flow from the Electricity Act. And in the Act, the government of Jamaica now has the responsibility for planning the electricity sector. The GOJ also is responsible for the integrated resource plan, as the Director General mentioned earlier. What are the implications? There will be a revenue requirement that will be based on forward-looking costs derived from a business plan that is on the historic test year, and the historic test year will be the 2018 year that JPS has just completed, and for that year there will be an audited statement of accounts that JPS will be required to present. So there will be projections that will start in that year, 2018, and the OUR is required to publish a final criteria to guide the development of this JPS rate proposal. That with what previously obtained under the price cap regime to that which now obtains under the new revenue cap regime, and how rates are determined. Rates are determined under the price cap regime on historic year cost of service review. Under this new regime, the revenue cap, rates are determined from forecasts on the operation and maintenance cost and the capital expenditures, and those are projected cost of service from the business plan that JPS is expected to submit over the 5-year period. What is the form of the regulation? Under the old regime, it's a price cap. The new regime is the revenue cap. And what is this revenue cap entails? It should include the most recent IRP, the JPS's business plan, the final criteria, and the base year, which is, as I mentioned earlier, is the 2018 financial year. What is the inflation? There are annual adjustments that will be made to the tariff that is set in 2019. Under the whole regime, there was an annual inflation. Under this revenue cap, there will be cumulative inflation adjustments set. And as I said, the revenues will be capped, and that is the revenue that will be adjusted by the cumulative inflation. There's also a productivity factor. Under the price cap regime, the productivity, which is the X factor, was determined at the start of the period from benchmarking study. And the X factor impacts adjustments of prices annually. under the revenue cap regime, there will not be an X factor, but there will be an implicit productivity factor that is determined at the start of the period from benchmarking studies. And the productivity factor is implicitly included in the setting of revenue requirement over the period. There will also be benchmarking studies, as I mentioned. In both the revenue cap and the price cap, benchmarking studies are done. And the terms of the review are similar. This will be a 5-year review, and the price cap review was also a 5-year review. There's the treatment of unforeseen events, such as hurricanes. Those events were treated under a Z factor, Z factor adjustment under the price cap. This still obtains in the revenue cap, but it's expanded to include even an extraordinary review if during the 5-year period there is need for an adjustment to the rates that is set. There's the incremental capital module that is now captured under the Z factor adjustment to the revenue. So let us go over, look at the broad overview of the rate review process. We have here a 5-step process that we will examine. There's the pre-application phase. That's phase 1, wherein the OUR published a draft criteria 50 months before the application itself, which is expected in April. And the ministry was expected to publish its integrated resource plan. And that's the Ministry of Science, Energy, and Technology who has that responsibility. The criteria process. It went through a process of consultation wherein the draft criteria was published and stakeholders got an opportunity to comment on what will go into the criteria. There is a final criteria that is published after the draft has been consulted on. And there are challenges. There's a situation wherein it is still a teething process, and this process had some kinks. And we're hoping that this review, which is going to be on a broad consultation basis, will benefit from the criteria that has been published. So the tariff application, as I mentioned earlier, is expected in April of this year. And OUR informs JPS of any deficiencies in that application within 10 days, 10 calendar days of submission of that application. So we're expected to advise the JPS if in fact there are any deficiencies in that application within 10 calendar days. And after the application has been accepted, there is a process of public consultation. That's phase 4 of this review process. There will be a series of town hall meetings and breadth of Jamaica to give stakeholders, the ordinary consumer, an opportunity to comment on JPS's application. And JPS, not the OUR, because it is their application. And that public comments are also expected by way of emails. If you happen to be unable to attend the consultations, you may also visit our website. The application will be posted, and you get an opportunity to write into the OUR to make comments on that application. And finally, the phase of analysis and determination. That's where the rubber hits the road, where the analyst will look closely at the application, and they will make its analysis, evaluation, and prepare the determination for the office to make this decision. So I'll briefly run through the rate review process, which, of course, I mentioned already, it involves an acceptance of the application, analysis of the submission, and the approval of the determination. Calendar days, as I mentioned earlier, and that application should include the business plan. It should include the integrated resource plan if it is available. But of course, you heard from the Director General that might be absent this time around. And so we are expected that within 10 days, we get back to JPS with approval of the submission that it is in order. There's the analysis phase, where a review team will be established by the OUR, the analyst, with consultants if necessary, will review the application. The data will be processed, and if necessary, additional data must be requested from the JPS within 1 month of acceptance of the application. And after the review, the approval process takes place where the analyst will submit to the office's technical committee the submission for their review and to make its determination as to what will be the decision on the rates. So, to recap the consultation process, we will be hosting a number of town hall meetings. The public will get an opportunity to discuss the issues. There will be technical issues, and there will be their personal issues. And we welcome you, our viewers, and our listeners, your comments on that submission. So at this time, I'll hand over to Camille, who will walk you through what is really expected in that application. She'll make a more detailed look. Camille, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Winston. And good afternoon to all of you here in the studio and those who are joining us from various locations across Jamaica and indeed globally. Winston's presentation went through the mechanics of the rate review process. In this section of the presentation, we're focusing on the OUR's expectation in terms of what is expected from JPS in its proposal. And this is in the context that it's a new process for the OUR, new process for JPS, and also for the customers. So, in reviewing the JPS's proposal, the OUR will focus broadly on 3 main core, what we call the core of JPS's presentation. We'll want to ensure that JPS's proposal provides cost-effective solutions, which are customer-focused. That is, they should deliver value to the customers. We'd also want to ensure that JPS's proposal is based on a sound planning foundation, right, which incorporates customer preference and is driven by the benefits. And we'd also want to ensure that the pace and timing of the proposal in terms of the plans that JPS will make will consider the tariff implications as well. And of course, the OUR is always interested in continuous improvement. So in assessing JPS's proposal, we want to ensure that certain performance, its operational efficiency is improved. And that is including the system losses. We want to have a reduction in system losses over time, an improvement in reliability, and also an improvement in its efficiency as measured by the heat rate. Now, the OUR has already set its expectations of the JPS in the draft criteria, which was published earlier. And in that criteria, we looked at some key considerations that usually we would have done under the price cap anyway, but it's a little bit more. We have given JPS a lot more guidance because of the draft criteria. So some of the things that we looked at was the cost of capital study. And OUR engaged international experts during that process. We actually consulted with stakeholders, including the Bank of Jamaica and JPS. We have considered all the stakeholder expectations. Now, the cost of capital study will inform the rate of return that JPS's shareholders will receive. And usually in the past, we've had this divergence of views between the OUR and JPS on this particular matter. So the fact that we have gotten the stakeholders' involvement was a key input, and I think that should help to make the process much better than before. In terms of the productivity factor, Winston mentioned that before. It's one of the key levers that the OUR has in terms of ensuring the operational efficiency of JPS. It ensures that the cost of JPS's operating costs will decrease over the rate review period. In this process, we also engaged a consultant, and that consultant consulted with JPS and others. We have gotten feedback from JPS, and the OUR has considered JPS's feedback in terms of drafting the final criteria for this particular element. We have also looked at the methodology for setting the performance targets for JPS. That is the losses, the heat rate, the reliability target as measured by the SAIDI, the SAFE, and the KD factors. We have set those methodologies. We have outlined them to JPS. And of course, we have also gone into the key elements that we expect from the business plan, including the capital expenditure planning or the CapEx planning process. Those are key elements of the proposal for the rate review period, under the revenue cap methodology. So those are some key considerations. Also, we have elaborated on what we expect from JPS in terms of tariff design and some other factors. Now, in doing the review or in conducting the review, the OER would want to ask itself some key questions or to answer some key questions in looking at JPS's plan, because for the first time, JPS's rate will be determined from a business plan and not from historic costs. So for the first time, the OER will be looking at JPS's strategies for delivering service to its customers, right? So application made by JPS takes into consideration the guidelines laid out in the final criteria, and that's first and foremost. But the other questions we'll ask, and I think those are even more pertinent to the final outcome over the 5-year period, is whether the plan that JPS has outlined will align with all the data and information that it provides us, whether the various components and the steps are shown clearly and whether they are being optimized. And by optimized, we mean that JPS is looking at the lowest cost solution that delivers best quality service or good quality service as the customer may define it. We're also concerned that JPS should also consider the preferences of its customer base. And we expect that JPS would have done its own consultations prior to the application process with its customer to understand what their preferences are, what are the things that they would want the utility to deliver to them. So that's a key consideration as well. And of course, everything must be guided by the benefits that is delivered to the customers. That's the whole purpose of the utility at the end of the day, to deliver benefits, to deliver a particular service to the customers. The utilities business plan would outline some key objectives that it would want to achieve. And we would also have to look at whether those outcomes, the processes that JPS would outline or the plans that JPS has put together would allow it to achieve the outcomes that it is expecting. And of course, we'll also want to have things to be done cost effective. So we said the optimization of costs is a very important consideration. And also prioritization, how the projects are prioritized, the pacing, and how that will impact our rates. So that's also another key consideration for the OER. Now, there are two broad elements that are key to our considerations at the OER. One of them is the tariff design. There are a lot of things happening in the energy sector, in the electricity sector specific, continue to evolve. And I'm sure the JPS would agree with this, that there are a lot of changes taking place, and it's not business as usual by any measure. So we're expecting that in doing its tariff design, that JPS will consider the recent trends and the emerging trends, and that the tariff design will be responsive to those trends. Whether there are challenges or opportunities that could be derived from those, we expect that they will consider that in their proposal. Of course, we expect that the tariff design will also follow key regulatory principles, and that is like economic efficiency, cost reflectivity, revenue recovery, and stability over time. And of course, it's also important that the tariff design factors the national policy objectives. The government has some clear objectives in terms of where it wants to see the electricity sector evolve, and the tariff design should also feature that. And where there are cases where the tariff design might be significantly different from the existing structure, we expect that JPS will have a workable, can understand that they will be suitably informed prior to any changes taking place, and that a workable solution that will actually be implemented. I mentioned that before that the business plan, for the first time, JPS's rates will be based on a business plan. A key ingredient of that business plan is the capital expenditure plan. Now, JPS's capital expenditure, that is what, the capital is really the assets that provide the service that the customer needs, right? These include the generating plants, the transmission lines, distribution line, etc. Now, JPS will be making a CapEx proposal, and what the OER expects is that JPS's CapEx plan should be underpinned by an asset condition assessment, meaning that we should understand the status of the existing assets, whether they're defective, what state they're in, whether they need to be replaced. So that will help to inform our decision on what are the capital programs that JPS should pursue. In addition, we expect that JPS will be looking at energy efficiency, looking at new technologies that would help to enhance the service that it provides to the customers and also reduce costs over time. And as we mentioned before, the national planning and government objectives should always be a consideration. JPS's plan should also demonstrate how it supports effective management of the existing assets and the assets that it will be planning for over the period. And it should also demonstrate that the plan is optimized through consideration of alternatives, other options, maintenance programs that could have delivered the solution. JPS needs to ensure that they have looked at the option, that this is the best option available for the customer in the most cost-effective manners. And of course, we have mentioned before about the pace and timing of the project and the implication for the rate impact as well. So in closing, we expect that the focus will be on strategy and results and not the various steps and activities that JPS took to get there, but the results are very important. Right? What JPS puts in front of us that it will lead to a lower price trajectory for the electricity sector over, for the customers, because we know that is a very vexing issue. So that will always be considered as an important objective for the OUR. And of course, we also expect that there will be improvement in operational efficiency over time. Losses, reliability, and heat rate, those are factors or issues that affect our customers. We expect that there will always be an improvement where that is concerned. And also customer service, I haven't put it there, but it's a key equally served. And of course, at the end of all of this, what JPS should be providing is value to customers.
Thank you so much, Camille Rowe there. Before we go to our next panelist, I would just like to remind you that you can participate in this webinar. If it is that you're on our YouTube page listening in or watching, you can place your comments there. So too, via our Facebook Live page, you can also post your questions or comments there. And our special WhatsApp number, 876-316-2648. That's 876-316-2648. So, a significant part of the review of the JPS application will be assessing the quality of service components. Very, very important. How does the OUR hold JPS accountable to service standards to you, the customers? Consumer Affairs Specialist at the OUR, Colette Good, will explain her role in this process. Colette.
Thank you so much, Liz, and good afternoon to our viewers. As Liz just mentioned, in addition to the process that will be undertaken to determine the rate that JPS will be allowed to charge its customers, the OUR's tariff review process also includes a review of the quality of service that JPS delivers to its customers. And this quality of service is comprised of two main components. One is the overall standards and the other. Now, what are the overall standards? These are standards that prescribe performance levels that JPS should specific service to its customers. For example, JPS is required to give at least 48 hours, that is 2 days advanced notice to its customers about planned outages. So if it is that JPS is aware that it will need to disrupt service in a particular area to carry out any maintenance activities, then they should notify customers in at least 2 days prior to that planned service disruption. Although there is that target to be attained by JPS, though, there is no compensation mechanism that is attached to the overall standard. However, the OUR does monitor JPS's performance against the overall standards, as the company is expected or is required to submit quarterly reports on its performance against the standard, and we review those reports to assess the company's performance. We also include a report on some aspects of the JPS's performance against the overall standards in our Consumer Quarterly Performance Report, which is published. So you, the consumers, can also be aware of how JPS's performs against overall standards when you take a performance report. There is also the guaranteed standards. And similar to the overall standards, the guaranteed standards also represent similar prescribed service levels to be attained by JPS in delivering service to its customers. An example of a guaranteed standard: not send more than 2 consecutive estimated bills where the company has access to its meter. There is a compensation mechanism attached so that where JPS commits a breach of any of the individual standards, the customer is entitled to compensation, which is made by way of a credit to their accounts. And for JPS, all compensation for breaches of guaranteed standards is made by way of the credit being applied automatically to the customer's account. So customers, you do not need to complete any form or do so that you can know when a breach has occurred, so that you can look out for the line item on your bill, which will indicate that the credit has been applied to your account. So in reviewing the quality of service standard in the tariff review process, what will this involve? It will involve an against the overall and guaranteed standards during the review period, and that period, so we will take a look at how JPS performed against each of the overall and each of the guaranteed standards to see what areas they need to improve on, and to assess whether the OUR needs to provide them with additional resources so that they can achieve and maintain the prescribed levels under the overall and guaranteed standards. The review process will also involve an assessment of whether any changes need to be made to the quality of service standard. We will look at the overall and guaranteed standards to see whether there are any other areas out there that are not covered currently being addressed under the quality of service standards that we need to include. Or we may make changes to the targets, or we may even decide to remove a standard. But that assessment is done, and the final determination will be included in the determination notice that will be issued. In addition to the review of the quality of service standard, though, the OUR will also do an assessment of the contacts that were received throughout the tariff review period in terms of what was it that persons contacted us about mostly with respect to JPS score. We will also, as Liz and my fellow panelists, be hosting public consultations so that we can hear the views of you, the consumers, you, the users of the electricity service, so that we can hear your experience to see whether there are any areas that needs to be addressed that are not currently being addressed under the quality of service standard. And we would also put forward the recommendation with respect to the measures that need to be taken to address those areas. So I thank you for joining us, and I will now hand over to Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Colette. So the panelists, you would have heard them talk about the consultation process. Throughout the course of today's proceedings, you'd have heard several mention being made about the consultation process. And it is a key component of the analysis of the application that JPS will submit, because we regard the customer input as key, because you are JPS's customers. You are their largest block of stakeholders. You are very, very important for that company. So let's talk a bit about what the consultation process will entail. Now, when JPS submits an application and it is formally accepted by the OUR, we engage in a period of public consultation. Now, in carrying out our duty as the independent regulator, the OUR has been charged to operate in a transparent, accountable, and non-discriminatory manner. Public consultations is one way in which the OUR discharges that responsibility. So customer feedback, like yours, helps us to guide some of the decisions that we will have to make. So what format do these consultations take? So the most common one will be town hall meetings. We go across the island and we conduct town hall meetings with residents. And then we have business meetings, which comprises professional bodies, civic groups, academia, etc. And then we invite you to also do your written submissions. Very important, because some persons may not be able to go to the meetings, but they can always feel free to email us or send it via mail, their submissions regarding the JPS's application. Town hall meetings, we make an effort to go into most of the parishes. So we know for sure, while we're still tying it up, we know for sure we'll be going into Kingston and St. Andrew, because it has one of the largest, it's the most populated area in Jamaica. We'll be adding on more parishes as we have would have confirmed them. So just to give an idea, a few of the parishes that will. At the town hall meetings, Winston alluded to this earlier, I'm just reiterating it. The format is simple. We do brief remarks from the OUR. We are mere facilitators of the process. And then it is JPS that makes the presentation to the companies. So we don't make the case for JPS. It is JPS who will be outlining the major aspect of its application. And they will be residents who will be at that meeting. So JPS representatives who are there will be answering the questions and maybe commenting on the comments that residents would have made there. So the OUR is merely the facilitator. We organize and set up the meetings, but it's really a conversation between JPS and its customers. Business meetings, as I said before, it comprises professional groupings, bodies, etc., civic groups, consumer groups, academia, and it will be held in Kingston and St. James. Written submissions, we have set up a special email address for persons wishing to comment on the JPS application. So what we do whenever we get the application, we do a summary, maybe a one-page or a two-page summary. So it's much easier than the 100 and odd pages that you'll have to pour through to get to the gist of exactly what they're asking for. So we try to simplify it for you. We give you a two-pager, and you can look at it, see for yourself what they're asking. You can always go back to the document, the substantial document. Both will be on our website. And if you feel moved to comment, then please shoot us an email at jporg.jm. Or you can send a mail through the regular postal service at our address, and we are on Google. How else can you participate? We are planning to have at least one live broadcast of one of the meetings, so you can listen as well, and we'll tell you how you can make your comments. The email address we just identified, as well as on our social media pages. So we are on our Facebook, we are on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and of course, we have our website. So please feel free to comment in any area. So we're making it as comfortable, and you can send us SMS. This number that we have, that we're facilitating our webinar, comments through our webinar, comments on our webinar, the 876-316-2647. We will also be making it available for persons to send us their WhatsApp messages. So we're now going to go into our question and answer session. We want to hear from you. I know we've been getting a few comments. We've been getting a few comments. I'm going to be throwing to one of the questions that I see coming in. Just a reminder again, it's on your screen. You can send us a WhatsApp via 876-316-2647, or you can comment on our Facebook page or Facebook Live page if you're watching us via Facebook Live, or on our YouTube page. So, the first question, I think I'm going to throw this to Winston.
Yes.
So the question is, if the JPS retools its plant and improves generating capacity, will non-fuel tariff increase or decrease?
Well, that seems logical, that it will increase if it's a retooling.
Yes.
But of course, the costs are going to be spread over the life of the plant. And
Yes.
so we don't expect to see a big lumpy increase in your tariff if in fact JPS retools its plants, because you recover for this asset over the life of the plant and not just in this 5-year review period that we are now looking at reviewing.
Yes. Okay, so why every 5 years, Winston? Why is it that JPS is allowed to submit? We already identified that, yes, it's under the Act. But is there a magic reason for 5 years?
Well, whilst the license prescribes a 5-year review period, it's logical because performance-based mechanism. You should give JPS some time to perform if in fact it's reviewing its capital and operating expenses.
Yeah.
To say, hey, 5 years is a reasonable time and we should look back to see how have you performed, and then they'll plan again for another 5 year. If it's a year or two, it would not be sufficient. And so international is an accepted review period for under a price cap or revenue cap regime to look at a 5-year review period to assess the performance of the utility company.
It was mentioned in the presentation that after we get the JPS's application, we give ourselves 10 working days. Is it working days to go over the document to see if we are formally accepting it?
No, that's really calendar days.
It's 10 calendar days.
Yes.
So we give ourselves 10 calendar days. So my question is twofold. When do we formally accept it? And how long does the process take for us to complete our assessment of it?
So after the submission of the application, the technical team would requisite documentation is present, and the OUR has 10 guys if it in fact their submission is accepted. So after acceptance, the clock begins to tick for the review process itself.
For the review process.
And that review process is expected to be completed in 120 days, and that is calendar days. So we expected that after acceptance, 120 days would have elapsed, and the office is expected to make a determination by then.
So I think there's a proviso as well, Winston, to that 120 days, because, for example, if it is that we have asked for, as we do from time to time, critical information that may not have been initially submitted, and we would have given JPS in this instance a timeline within which to submit it. If there is a protracted delay in submitting those additional documents and information, do we continue to rack up days under that 120-day period?
No. What the license provides for is for a 1-month period in which all the additional data should be requested, and JPS should respond within, I think, 10 working days, 10 calendar days rather, to our request for any additional information that we would require.
And if it takes much longer than the 10 days?
Well, we may have to stop the clock.
We may have to stop.
Prescribed by law to be completed within a particular period, and JPS is, not responding, then
Yes.
we cannot continue.
Yeah. Camille, JPS submits an annual adjustment application. What is the difference between an annual application that they submit and this 5-year application?
Okay. So the 5-year rate review is actually when JPS's base rates are set, and that's based on a review of the cost of service. So all of JPS's costs are reviewed, In this case, because we're now under the revenue cap system, JPS's business plan will be reviewed, and the impact that that has on cost in terms of building up its revenue requirement, that's done at the 5-year rate review process. In the annual rate review, what we do is actually adjust that base based on movements in inflation, foreign exchange rate, and other factors as well. But it's really just an adjustment of the base based on external factors.
Yeah. Colette, the guaranteed standards, I think it's a bit more popular than the overall standards because, I mean, persons can be compensated if there's a breach of these guaranteed standards that we have for JPS, and we also have guaranteed standards for the NWC. But tell me, because for persons who, because, you know, I will always play devil's advocate because we hear the questions out there and so on. The guaranteed standards is a critical component through which we hold JPS accountable to the customers, and the customers themselves hold JPS accountable, where if there's any breach of them towards customers, then the affected customers are to be compensated. But over the last few years, there have been some changes to the guaranteed standards. Colette, tell us a bit about some of those changes that we have implemented.
Yes, you are correct, Liz. In the last determination, as a matter of fact, what the OUR decided was to begin the process to change the compensation mechanism from a combination of automatic payments as well as the customers being required to complete a claim form to only automatic payments. So now, well, since 2017, all JPS guaranteed standards have attracted automatic compensation. So customers no longer need to submit a claim form. But we do encourage them that they should still ensure that they remain aware of what the guaranteed standards are so they can know when a breach has occurred. Also, coming out of the last tariff review, that with the implementation of the RAMI systems, the customers who were being transferred from the old system onto the RAMI system in terms of service disruption. So what we did was to put a timeline within which that transition ought to be made to reduce the inconvenience to customers, customer service that would be disrupted as a result of that transition. So if JPS Co exceeds that 3-hour period that was set, then the customer would be entitled to compensation.
So as this review, to also conduct a review of the quality of service standards, which includes the guaranteed standards.
That is correct.
Yeah. Not a technical person. I saw your efforts to explain it, and I really, really thought that it was nicely broken down where you made the comparison. But let me ask you, is there any advantage or disadvantage of one as opposed to the other?
Disadvantages or advantages, yes and no.
Yes.
With the price cap over the rate review period, that 5-year period, prices are held in real terms. They won't move. Of course, for inflation and foreign exchange movement, but the real price of JPS remains capped or fixed over the 5-year. With the revenue cap, the revenues will remain fixed, but of course, the prices may move either up or down. The customers can benefit from that regime because if in fact JPS sells more than is projected, then of course, if your revenues are capped and you have more volumes, then your price should be reducing. So under the price cap regime, prices are held constant in real terms. But under the revenue cap, revenues are fixed. Prices may move over time, either up or down, depending on the amount of electricity that the JPS sells. Yes.
Okay, so panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I think we we're able to explain a bit more involved, how it will be different this time around. We invite persons to log on again and have a listen. Is available at the OUR to explain something to you. So please feel free to call us. You can call us in the Public Affairs Unit. We're only too happy to assist you. Where we don't understand what you're asking or don't have the answers, then we'll make an effort to get it for you. So we are expecting JPS, as I said at the beginning of this webinar, to submit its license provides for it to submit an application, a tariff review application every 5 years by April. And so we are expecting them to submit that as per schedule. As we close our webinar today, we hope you found it very useful. You can go back and watch it again, as I said before, and feel free to invite other persons to view it as well. It's an important webinar, information that we want you to have, because the decisions that we will make will impact every single person who consumes electricity. I want to thank you for joining us today. We recognize that you had other things to do, but you took the time to join us. So we really, really want to thank you for that. Thanks to my panelists, Call It Good, Camille Rowe, Winston Robotham, and earlier we had our Director General who made a very, very important statement on the assessment of the application and how it will be impacted in the absence of an integrated resource plan. So I want to thank our Director General, Ansel Hewitt, who was here as well. The webinar would not have been possible without a strong technical team, and I want to thank Visual Tech and the team from Visual Tech for providing the technical services to enable the success of this webinar. Thanks also to the Jamaica Conference Center for hosting us. And last but not least by any means is our producer, the man behind the scenes, the one who made it all happen today, Gordon Brown. Thank you so much, Gordon. Thank you again for listening, and catch you another time. I am Elizabeth Bennett Marsh.
The OUR is here to regulate the operation. But you want to light and power your internet and phone. The OUR is here to get you to know your rights.
The OUR is here to regulate how the public utilities operate. Water, light, phone, and internet. The OUR keep them in check.
Contact us at 1-888-CALL-OUR, the Office of Utilities Regulation. OUR, regulating utilities for the benefit of all.